The Clerk.
Private Members Business Notice Number 2, Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Amendment, Making Marine Parks Accountable Bill 2012.
I call the member for Dawson.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I present the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Amendment, Making Marine Parks Accountable Bill 2012 and the explanatory memorandum.
The member for Dawson has the call.
Mr Speaker, the Gillard Labor government's current process of declaring marine protected areas is not the result of rigorous scientific analysis that has been made publicly available or extensive industry and community consultation. The government has not engaged in a proper consultation. Their approach is one of take it or leave it, with no consideration for Australia's fishers or the coastal communities that rely on the fishing industry. The fishing sector is worth billions of dollars to the Australian economy. The sector employs thousands of people across the whole country. However, the government has dismissed the social and economic impacts that their announcement will have on local communities that rely heavily on a vibrant fishing industry. Both recreational and commercial fishers across Australia, together with the communities that rely on their fishing industries, will be adversely affected by the government's latest announcement regarding the proposed marine protected areas. Furthermore, the government has failed to understand the importance of recreational fishing to many Australians and has failed to consider the important economic contribution that recreational fishing has to many coastal communities. Fishing is a recreational pastime that is enjoyed by 5 million Australians, and the industry generated by recreational fishing makes an important economic contribution, upwards of $2.2 billion. In government, the Liberal National Coalition undertook rigorous assessments that resulted in the establishment of 11 marine protected areas. These declarations were achieved with broad community and industry support. The Liberal National Coalition acknowledges that Australia's fisheries are among the best managed in the world. However, the government should not take this for granted by attempting to put forward marine protected area proposals that haven't been subjected to proper scientific and commercial rigour or followed a consultation process that has been conducted in an open and transparent manner. The Australian fishing industry is one of the most environmentally responsible fishing industries in the world. The government, in attempting to lock out fishing access, is at the same time damaging the livelihood of thousands of people across this country. This bill rectifies the government's shortcomings. It will require the minister to commission an independent social and economic impact assessment before any proclamations are made. The bill will also require the Minister for the Environment to obtain independent, scientific, peer-reviewed advice that is made publicly available. It will also require that the government establish an independent scientific reference panel, as well as a stakeholder advisory group, so that decisions are made with rigour following extensive consultation and analysis of possible scientific, economic and social impacts of any proposed marine protected area. Finally, the bill will put the Parliament in charge of the final decisions by making declarations disallowable by this Parliament. This bill returns balance and fairness to marine conservation so that all Australians can have the confidence that the best decisions are being made in protecting our marine biodiversity as the fishers and communities that feed so many Australians. Now, this bill, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, is, as its name suggests, it's about making the marine parks process accountable. Accountable to the science, accountable to the community and industries that this bill, that the proposed marine parks proposal will affect. It also makes it accountable to the people by giving this Parliament a say on the process. So it's all about accountability. But it's also about taking a stand and saying who is actually in control of this country. I mean, the Environment Minister, as we have seen in recent times, is very susceptible to lobbying through social media, but in this case he's been very susceptible to lobbying by foreign environmental groups such as the Pew Foundation. What the government is seeking to do with their marine parks proposal is increase the number of marine parks, basically fishing lockout areas, across Australian waters from 27 to 60, and it's doing it without correct and proper community consultation. Labor is creating a new marine parks as a way of just placating the Greens. The new marine parks are about politics rather than the result of genuine and publicly available independent scientific investigation and community consultation. Now, as I've said before, we have seen in recent times how the Minister is very susceptible to social media campaigns, and again in this instance Pew and Get Up and a whole bunch of environmental groups have taken to the internet to spread out chain emails, and this has hit many politicians' offices, including the Environment Minister. And that is what is driving this agenda, the new government by social media. The decision to close down the Coral Sea in my area of Queensland and also many other areas around Australia has been driven by this Pew Environmental Group. Now, the Pew Environmental Group was quoted in the head of it, a fellow by the name of Lee Crockett, who was the Director of Federal Fisheries Policy for the Pew Foundation in the United States. He was quoted in Fishing World magazine as rejecting the concept of actually locking up waters in the Gulf of Mexico. And he said that the push to close the Coral Sea to all angling was supported by, and I quote, hundreds of thousands of people throughout Australia and around the world, including recreational anglers. He went on to say that closing the Gulf of Mexico to fishing wouldn't make sense because the waters were, quote, a major US economic driver. And again, to quote him, the Gulf offers excellent angling opportunities and sport and commercial fishing generates billions of dollars and fresh seafoods to much of the nation, and he refers there to the United States of America. So we have, in essence, policy being driven in this country locking up Australian waters to recreational and commercial fishing, while US waters, where there may be similar, vague conservation values, where the Pew Foundation, the driver of this policy, is not willing to go for fear of what it may do to recreational fishermen and commercial fishermen in their country. So they won't touch American waters, but they are touching Australian waters, and they're touching it with the help of this government. And it begs the question, who is actually in control here? And there has been a lot of talk about how, from the Minister and from environmental groups, about how this does not affect recreational fishermen, which is complete rubbish because the sector is quite against it. Talk to the Australian Recreational Fishing Foundation, who've started the campaign Keep Australia Fishing. Talk to the Australian Marine Alliance, who represent some of the recreational fishing groups. Talk to the Australian Fishing Trade Association, who will also tell you that they are against this proposal. But the Minister talks about how no one's taking a tinny 400 kilometres off the coast. But if you have a look in any North Queensland marina, which is off the Coral Sea, there are not tinnies in those marinas. They are serious boats. And we don't just have commercial fishermen and recreational fishing boats there. We have tourism charter operators like Nomad Sports Fishing Adventures, which operates out of Mackay and goes out to Marion Reef, which I notice is one of the proposed areas to be locked up under the government's Marine Parks proposal. I want to quote something here because it proves the falsity of the claim that this process has been based on science. And Damon Olsen, who is the head of Nomad Sports Fishing Adventures, he says, all we want to achieve here is to ensure that our marine reserves are implemented with thorough scientific planning, scientific principles and practical outcomes that work for all user groups. All recreational fishing groups support closed-off areas, but only when thorough scientific processes have shown that those closed-off areas are required. The current process is closing off huge areas to recreational fishermen so the government can keep green groups happy and stay in power. He goes on to recall a meeting with the Federal Environment Minister, and he says the current process is proposing to close off the main area of the Perth Trench to all game fishing activities, essentially shutting down the entire game fishing industry and community in Perth. We asked the Minister why this zone had been placed in its proposed position, and we are told that the Minister drew the zone himself because they needed one in that area and there was no information to tell him where to put it, so he just placed it where he thought was appropriate. Well, this is science by texture, Mr Deputy Speaker. This is not real science. This bill makes the marine parks process accountable. It makes the marine parks process accountable not just to the science, but to the community, to the industries that it impacts upon, and to the people, by giving this parliament the ultimate say in the process. Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, I am very pleased to present this bill to the House, and I look forward to its support from the crossbenchers.